The space station called Horizon's Edge floated in the darkness of space near a dying red star. It was a meeting place for all the great species of the galaxy. Today, 12 different alien races had sent their leaders here for the annual Galactic Accord Summit. Ships of all shapes and sizes filled the docking bays. Some looked like silver needles. Others looked like floating rocks. One even looked like a giant jellyfish made of light. Captain Park stood near the observation window of the human quarters. She wore her formal military uniform, dark blue with gold buttons. Her black hair was tied back in a neat bun. She looked tired, but her eyes were sharp and focused. Behind her, a small girl with pigtails was jumping on the bed. "Please stop jumping," said without turning around. "But Mommy, there's no gravity." "Well, a little gravity. It feels funny." Giggled and fell onto the soft mattress. Sighed. She had not planned to bring her daughter to this summit, but her mother had gotten sick back on Earth, and there was no one else to watch. The girl was only 6 years old. She was curious about everything and afraid of nothing. This worried very much. A knock came at the door. Opened it to find Ambassador standing in the hallway. He was an older man with gray hair and kind eyes, but today those eyes looked worried. "Captain Park," he said formally. Then he looked past her and saw his face became even more worried. "You brought her." "I had no choice, Ambassador." Stepped inside and closed the door. "The other species are already talking. The collective thinks we are being disrespectful. The delegate called it proof that humans are still children themselves." His jaw tightened. "Let them talk. I will keep with me at all times. She will not cause problems." "Mommy, who is that man?" asked, now sitting cross-legged on the bed. "This is Ambassador. He is Mommy's boss." "Hello, little one," said, forcing a smile. Then he turned back to his voice dropping low. "There is something else, something worse. They are coming." Felt a cold feeling in her stomach. The Empire was the most powerful force in the galaxy. They did not ask for things. They took them. And when someone said no, they sent destruction. "When?" she asked. "They arrive in 1 hour, and they are bringing a dragon lord." The room became very quiet. Even Little stopped moving, though she did not understand why the air suddenly felt so heavy. Dragon lords were living weapons. They were creatures older than most civilizations. They could survive in space without suits. They could burn entire fleets with their breath. They used them to keep every other species afraid. No one had ever defeated a dragon lord in battle. "Which one?" whispered. The name hit her like a punch. Was the oldest of them all. 800 years of war and death followed that name. Stories said he had destroyed a planet once just because its people refused to bow. "Keep your daughter close," said. "Very close. And no matter what happens in that chamber, do not show fear. Fear is what they want." After the ambassador left, sat on the bed next to. The little girl looked up at her mother with big, innocent eyes. "Mommy, what is a dragon lord?" Thought carefully before answering. "It is a very big creature, very old, very dangerous." "Like a dinosaur." "Bigger than a dinosaur." "Cool." Eyes lit up with excitement instead of fear. Pulled her daughter into a hug. She wished she could see the universe through eyes full of wonder instead of danger, but she knew better. She had seen too much. 1 hour later, all the delegates gathered in the great assembly hall. It was a huge circular room with seats rising up like a stadium. In the center was a speaking platform. Floating screens showed translations in hundreds of languages. Sat in the human section with beside her. The little girl had a tablet with games on it, but she was more interested in looking at all the strange aliens around her. "Mommy, that one looks like a bug," she whispered loudly, pointing at. "Do not point, it is rude." The collective sat in their special water-filled chamber. They were small creatures that glowed different colors to show their feelings. Right now, they were all glowing a nervous yellow. Suddenly, the lights dimmed. A deep horn sound echoed through the hall. Everyone stopped talking. The great doors at the far end of the chamber began to open slowly. Cold air rushed in first. Then came the smell, old, ancient, like stone and fire mixed together. Heavy footsteps shook the floor. 2 tall figures walked in first. They had black skin that looked like polished stone and eyes that glowed red. They were soldiers. Between them walked High Speaker, the diplomat. He was taller than any human and wore robes of deep purple. But no one was looking at him. Behind them, filling the entire doorway, came. He was massive. His body was covered in scales that shifted between black and dark red. His wings were folded against his back, but they were still huge. His eyes burned like dying stars. Ancient fact and cold intelligence lived in those eyes. Chains wrapped around his legs and neck, not because he needed them, but to show that even this monster served the. Every creature in the room felt it, a wave of pure, primal terror. This was a predator that existed before their species learned to walk. This was death made flesh. The collective went completely dark. Several delegates fled their seats, even gripped his armrest until his knuckles turned white. Held tight against her side, her heart pounding. But was not afraid. She tugged at her mother's sleeve and asked in her small, clear voice, "Mommy, what is that sound? Is he purring?" And somewhere deep in his ancient chest, his heart made a sound it had not made in centuries. The assembly hall stayed silent for a long time after they entered. No one wanted to speak first. No one wanted to draw attention to themselves while that monster stood in the room. High Speaker walked to the center platform. His footsteps echoed in the quiet. Behind him, lowered himself to the ground, his massive body coiling like a snake made of stone and fire. His chains clinked softly against the floor. Delegates of the Galactic Accord began. His voice was smooth and cold like ice. "The Empire thanks you for this meeting. We come with a simple request." Request, the word almost made laugh. They never requested anything. "We require exclusive mining rights to the system, the cluster, and the Nexus Reach." Gasps filled the room. The Nexus Reach was a human colony. 3 million people lived there. It was humanity's most successful settlement outside their home system. Ambassador stood up. "The Nexus Reach is human territory. We have had a colony there for 30 years. You cannot simply take it." Smiled, it was not a friendly smile. "We are not taking anything, Ambassador. We are asking, politely." He gestured toward, "and we brought a friend to help with the conversation." Opened his eyes fully. Twin pools of ancient fire swept across the room. Wherever his gaze landed, delegates looked away or trembled. "Consider this a reminder," continued. "The Empire has kept peace in this galaxy for 2,000 years. That peace has a price. Pay it willingly or pay it another way." The meeting continued, but everyone knew the truth. This was not a negotiation. This was a threat. They would take what they wanted and no one could stop them, not while they had dragon lords. Grew bored very quickly. The adults were talking about things she did not understand. Mining rights, territory disputes, trade agreements. It all sounded like the boring news programs her mother watched. She looked around the room. The glowing aliens in the water tank were pretty. The bug person had interesting eyes, but she had already seen all of them. She wanted to explore. "Mommy, can I go to the bathroom?" she whispered. Was focused on the heated debate happening on the floor. Ambassador was arguing with about human rights. She glanced at distractedly. "Yes, but come right back. The bathroom is just outside the door to the left." Nodded and slipped out of her seat. She walked toward the exit, her small shoes making soft sounds on the metal floor. A guard drone floated near the door, its single blue eye watching her. She did go to the bathroom, but on her way back she saw something interesting. A corridor branched off to the right. It was darker than the main hallway, and soft purple lights glowed along the floor. They pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat. "Pretty," said to herself. She knew she should go back to her mother, but the lights were so beautiful, just a quick look would not hurt. She followed the lights. The corridor led deeper into the station. The air grew colder. The walls changed from smooth metal to rough black stone. Did not notice how far she had walked. She was too busy watching the lights dance. Dr. Han was hurrying through the corridor when she almost tripped over the small girl. "Oh," caught herself against the wall. "What are you doing here, little one? This area is restricted." Looked up at the woman. She had a kind face and wore a white coat. I was following the pretty lights. Looked at the warning markers on the floor. They were meant to keep people away, not attract them. But to a child, they probably did look pretty. Where is your mother? Asked. In the big room with all the aliens. Checked her communicator. She had an emergency call from the medical bay. One of the delegates had collapsed from stress, but she could not leave this child here alone. She spotted a service drone nearby. Drone, please escort this child back to the main assembly hall. The drone beeped in confirmation. Its blue eye turned too. Follow the drone, okay, said. It will take you back to your mommy. Nodded, okay. Hurried away toward the medical bay. The drone began floating toward the main corridor, followed it for about 10 steps. Then the drone made a strange buzzing sound, spun in a circle and crashed into the wall. Its blue eye flickered and went dark. Hello, poked the drone. It did not respond. She looked back at the pretty lights. They were still pulsing, leading deeper into the dark corridor. Without the drone to guide her, made a decision that only a 6-year-old would make. She followed the lights again. The corridor opened into a massive chamber. It was bigger than anything had ever seen. The ceiling disappeared into darkness above. The walls were carved with strange symbols that seemed to move when she was not looking directly at them. And in the center of the chamber, unchained and alone, was. He was even bigger than he had looked in the assembly hall. His body could have filled her entire house back on Earth. His scales caught the faint light and shimmered like dark jewels. His breath came out in slow, hot clouds that smelled like smoke and something older. His eyes opened. 2 burning stars looked down at the tiny human girl standing at the entrance of his chamber. In 800 years, had seen countless beings enter his presence. They always came with weapons or with fear or with desperate pleas for mercy. He had killed most of them. This tiny creature carried none of those things. Looked up at the massive dragon alien. She had never seen anything so big. He was even bigger than the dinosaurs at the museum. His eyes were scary, but also kind of sad. She was supposed to be afraid. All the adults were afraid of him, but did not feel afraid. She felt curious. Hello, she said. Her small voice echoed in the huge chamber. My name is, what is your name? Did not move. He did not speak. He simply stared at this impossible creature who had walked into his prison without fear. In 800 years, no one had ever asked his name. Had lived for 800 years. In that time, he had burned cities. He had crushed armies. He had watched entire civilizations fall to dust because they dared to stand against the empire. His name was spoken in whispers across 1,000 worlds. Mothers used his name to frighten children into obedience. And now a tiny human girl was standing in front of him, asking his name. He could kill her with a single breath. He could snap her up in his jaws before she even had time to scream. He had done it before, to beings much larger and stronger than this child. But he did not move. Something about her was different. He could feel no fear coming from her, no hatred, no desire for power or revenge. She was simply looking at him with big, curious eyes, waiting for an answer. I am, he finally said. His voice was deep and rumbling like thunder from far away. He had not spoken his own name in 200 years. They called him many things, weapon, beast, tool, but never by his true name. Smiled, that is a cool name. My name means smile in Korean. My daddy picked it. She sat down on the cold floor, crossing her legs like she was getting ready for story time at school, watched her with growing confusion. Why was she not running? Why was she not screaming for help? Where is your daddy now? Asked. He did not know why he was asking. He did not care about human families, but the words came out anyway. Smile became a little sad. He is with the stars now. Mommy says he went on a long trip and cannot come back. I miss him sometimes. Something stirred in his ancient heart, a feeling he had buried long ago, deep beneath centuries of violence and obedience. He remembered loss. He remembered when his own kind had been free, before they found them and turned them into weapons. I am sorry, he said. The words felt strange in his mouth. He had never apologized for anything in his life. It is okay, said. She looked up at his massive face. "You look sad too. Are you sad?" Did not answer right away, sad. He was not sure he knew what that word meant anymore. He was old, he was tired, he was alone. Was that sadness? "I have been alone for a very long time," he finally said. Nodded like she understood completely. "Being alone is hard. When Daddy first went away, I felt alone even when Mommy was there. But then I got my bunny and he helps me feel better." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small stuffed rabbit. It was gray and worn from years of love. "His name is, do you want to see him?" She held up the tiny toy toward the giant dragon, lowered his massive head until his eye was level with the stuffed animal. The rabbit was smaller than one of his scales. It was nothing. It was meaningless. But to this child, it meant everything. "He is very nice," said softly. Beamed with pride. "Daddy gave him to me. He said would protect me when he could not." She hugged the rabbit close to her chest. "Sometimes I talk to when I am scared. He is a good listener." "Do you talk to him about your father?" Nodded. "I tell him all the things I want to tell Daddy, like how I learned to read big words, and how I made a friend at school named, and how Mommy cries sometimes when she thinks I am asleep." Felt something crack inside him. This child carried grief that no one her age should carry, and yet she was sitting here, sharing her heart with a monster without any fear at all. "You are very brave," he said. Tilted her head. "Mommy says that too, but I do not feel brave. I just do not like being scared. Being scared makes my tummy hurt." "Wise words," murmured. They sat in silence for a moment. The massive chamber felt less cold now, less empty. "Why are you in chains?" asked suddenly. "Did you do something bad?" Closed his eyes. How could he explain 800 years of slavery to a child? How could he tell her about the neural bond that connected him to, forcing him to obey every command? How could he describe the feeling of having no choices, no freedom, no will of his own? "I belong to someone," he said simply. "They tell me what to do." "That does not seem fair," said with a frown. "Everyone should get to choose what they want to do." "Yes," agreed, "they should." Stood up and walked closer to him. She was so small that she could have stood on one of his claws. His breath washed over her, hot and smoky, but she did not step back. "You seem nice," she said. "I do not think you are bad, you just seem lonely and sad." She reached up on her tiptoes, stretching as high as she could. Her small hand touched his armored snout. His scales were warm and rough, like sun-heated stone. Then she leaned forward and pressed a gentle kiss to his nose. "It is okay to be sad," she whispered. "I get sad too, but it helps to have a friend." Froze. In 800 years no one had ever touched him with kindness. No one had ever shown him gentleness. He was a weapon. He was a monster. He was not worthy of affection. But this child did not see a weapon. She did not see a monster. She just saw someone who was sad and alone. A tear formed in his ancient eye. It rolled down his scaled face and fell to the floor, sizzling against the cold stone. Alarms suddenly blared throughout the station. Red lights flashed. Distant voices shouted in panic. The door to the chamber burst open and dozens of figures rushed in, ready for battle. But they stopped immediately. Stood at the front of the group, her heart pounding with terror. She had realized was missing 20 minutes ago. The search had led them here, to the dragon's chamber, where they expected to find tragedy. Instead, they found curled protectively around, his massive body forming a shield. His tail was wrapped gently around her like a blanket. His ancient eyes were closed, and for the first time in 800 years, there was peace on his face. Waved at her mother from within the dragon's embrace. "Hi, Mommy, I made a new friend. His name is, and he is actually really nice." No one in the room could speak. No one could move. They were witnessing something impossible. The deadliest creature in the galaxy had been tamed by a kiss from a 6-year-old girl. The news spread through the station like fire. Within minutes, every delegate, every guard, every worker knew what had happened in the dragon's chamber. A human child had walked into the presence of and walked out alive. More than alive. She had made friends with him. The assembly hall was in chaos when returned with. Aliens of every species were talking at once. The collective was flashing colors no one had ever seen before. Even the normally calm warriors were whispering among themselves. But the most affected person in the room was High Speaker. He stood frozen at the center platform. His red eyes were wide with something that looked like terror. For the first time in his long life, he did not know what to do. The neural bond that connected him to was silent. He had felt it go quiet the moment that human child kissed the dragon's nose. For 200 years, he had controlled through that bond. He could feel the dragon's emotions, send him commands, and force him to obey. Now there was nothing, just empty silence where his mind used to be. "What did you do?" hissed Ad as she entered the hall. "What did your creature do to my dragon?" Held close to her side. "My daughter did nothing wrong, she was lost. She found your dragon, they talked." Talked, laughed, but there was no humor in it. No one talks to a dragon lord, they obey or they die. That is the only way. "Maybe that is the problem," Ambassador said, stepping forward. "Maybe that is why he responded to her. She did not try to control him. She just showed him kindness." His face twisted with anger. Kindness? Kindness is weakness. Kindness is what gets species destroyed. The galaxy respects strength, not gentle words and soft touches. "Then why is your weapon no longer obeying you?" asked calmly. The question hung in the air, had no answer. He reached through the neural bond again, trying to assert control, but there was only silence. The doors to the assembly hall opened. Everyone turned to look. Entered, he moved slowly, his massive body barely fitting through the enlarged doorway. But something was different about him. The chains that had bound him before were gone, broken and left behind in his chamber. His eyes, once cold and deadly, now held a different light. Behind him walked. Gasped, "Get away from him." But just smiled and waved. "It is okay, Mommy is protecting me. He said he would not let anyone hurt me." Stopped in the center of the hall. His gaze swept across the assembled delegates. They all shrank back in fear, all except the humans. Then spoke. His voice filled the hall like rolling thunder. The walls shook. The lights flickered. Everyone felt his words vibrate in their bones. "For 800 years I have been a slave. I have killed because I was ordered to kill. I have destroyed because I had no choice. They took my freedom, my family, my very soul. They made me a monster." He paused, his ancient eyes found and they softened. "This child showed me something I had forgotten. She showed me that kindness exists, that gentleness is not weakness. She looked at me, the most feared creature in the galaxy, and she saw someone worth caring about. She gave me something no one has given me in 8 centuries. She gave me choice." Stepped forward, his hand raised as if to command. "I order you to." "No." The word was simple, but it carried the weight of centuries. Stumbled backward like he had been struck. "I will not obey you anymore," continued. "I will not be your weapon. I will not burn worlds for your empire. The bond is broken. I am free." Chaos erupted. The guards drew their weapons. Other delegates scrambled for cover, but did not attack. He simply stood there, calm and still, with little standing safely between his front legs. "If you attack," said quietly, "I will defend myself, and I will defend this child. But I do not wish to fight. I am tired of fighting." Looked at his guards, then at the other delegates, then back at. Without the Dragon Lord, they had no leverage. Their entire strategy depended on fear, and now their greatest source of fear had turned against them. "This is not over," snarled. "The Empire will not forget this insult." "Then let them remember," said, stepping forward boldly. "Let them remember that a human child did what no army could do. Let them remember that kindness defeated their greatest weapon, and let them think very carefully before threatening humanity again." Glared at the human ambassador. Then, without another word, he turned and marched out of the hall. The guards followed, leaving the assembly in stunned silence. The collective was the first to respond. Their lights began to pulse in a pattern that meant deep respect. Other delegates followed, bowing their heads or making gestures of honor toward the human section. The who had mocked humans just hours ago approached slowly. His many eyes blinked rapidly. "I apologize," he said, his voice clicking and humming. "I called your species children. I was wrong. Perhaps being like children is not weakness. Perhaps it is something we have all lost and forgotten. Did not know what to say. She just nodded and held. Lowered his great head until he was eye level with, "Thank you, little one. You have given me my life back." Reached out and patted his snout. "You are welcome. That is what friends do." And in the great assembly hall of Horizon's Edge, surrounded by the representatives of 100 worlds, the deadliest dragon in the galaxy closed his eyes and rumbled with something that sounded almost like a purr. 3 months had passed since the day that changed the galaxy. Did not understand why she was famous now. She just knew that strange packages kept arriving at their apartment in Seoul, gifts from planets she had never heard of, letters written in languages she could not read. Her mother had to get a special mailbox just for alien mail. "Mommy, another box came today," said, dragging a package that was almost as big as she was. "It is heavy." Looked up from her computer. She was no longer just a military captain. After the events on Horizon's Edge, the human government had promoted her to ambassador. She was now officially in charge of human and relations, though they were not talking to anyone these days. "Let me see," said, walking over. She opened the box carefully. Inside was a crystal that glowed with soft blue light. A note was attached, written in the flowing script of the collective. Used her translator device to read it. "To the small human who taught us that light can exist in darkness, may this crystal remind you that even the smallest glow can change the universe." Held the crystal up to her face. It was pretty, like a star she could hold in her hands. "Can we show?" she asked excitedly. "He would like this." Smiled. "We are going to see him tomorrow, remember. It is your monthly visit." Cheered and ran to her room to pack. She always brought things to show, drawings she had made, stories from school, pictures of her new friends. The next day, they boarded a shuttle to the human colony world of New Haven. It was a beautiful planet with green forests and blue oceans, much like Earth but younger and wilder. A large section of the northern continent had been set aside as a nature reserve. It was the new home of. The shuttle landed in a small clearing, jumped out before the doors were fully open, running across the grass toward the distant mountains. "I am here." Followed more slowly, carrying a bag of supplies. Dr. Han was waiting for her near the landing pad. The scientist had moved to New Haven full-time to study. Her research on the dragon had made her famous across the galaxy. "How is he?" asked. Smiled. "Better every day. He spends most of his time sleeping in the sun or exploring the mountains. He is like a different creature." They watched as disappeared into the tree line, still calling for her friend. "She really did change him," said softly. "I have studied dragon lords for 20 years. They are supposed to be incapable of forming emotional bonds outside their neural links. What she did should have been impossible." "Maybe that is what makes humans special," said. "We do impossible things." A shadow passed over the sun. Both women looked up to see gliding down from the mountains. His wings spread wide, catching the wind. He was still massive, still terrifying to look at, but there was grace in his movement now and peace in his ancient eyes. He landed gently in the clearing and immediately ran to him, throwing her small arms around his leg in a hug she could not complete. "I missed you," she shouted. "And I missed you, little one," rumbled. His voice was warm now, like a grandfather telling stories by a fire. "What have you brought to show me today?" Pulled out the crystal from the collective. "Look, it glows. They sent it because of you and me." Lowered his head to examine the small crystal. "It is beautiful, like starlight caught in stone." "That is exactly what I said." They spent the afternoon together. Told about school, about her friend, about the funny things her teacher said. Listened to everything with patience and interest. Sometimes he would share stories of his own, tales of distant stars and ancient times, of wonders he had seen before he became a weapon. Ambassador arrived in the evening. He had been working at the Galactic Council headquarters, helping to draft new agreements between humanity and other species. "The Council has made a decision," he told as they watched play in the field while rested nearby. "Humanity has been officially elevated to species of unique diplomatic value. We are no longer considered juveniles. Raised an eyebrow because of what happened. Because of what it means, said. A child with no weapons, no power, no agenda walked into the presence of the most dangerous creature alive and made friends with him. The other species cannot stop talking about it. They are studying human psychology now, trying to understand our emotional nature. Things they used to mock us for, they now want to learn. Watched her daughter climb onto his snout. The dragon lifted her gently toward the sky, and she laughed with pure joy. Maybe they will learn, said. Maybe they will understand that strength is not just about power. It is about connection, about love, about seeing the good in others even when everyone else sees a monster. The sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Sadon's head now, looking out at the horizon. She said, "Yes, little one. Are you happy now?" The dragon was quiet for a long moment. He thought about his centuries of slavery, his years of violence, the countless lives he had ended. He thought about the emptiness that had lived in his heart for so long. Then he thought about this small human girl who had looked at him without fear, who had asked his name, who had kissed his nose and called him friend. "Yes," he said finally, "I am happy." Smiled and patted his scales. "Good, because you deserve to be happy. Everyone deserves to be happy." Below and watched the scene in peaceful silence. "They still do not understand us," said quietly, echoing words from months ago. Smiled, her eyes wet with tears she did not try to hide. "Maybe that is our greatest strength." Above them, spread her arms wide as lifted her higher, and her laughter echoed across the valley like music. Higher, higher. And the ancient dragon, the terror of 1,000 worlds, the weapon that had been feared by all, obeyed the command of a little girl with joy in his heart. Because in the end, it was not fire that changed the galaxy. It was not war or weapons or threats. It was kindness. It was love. It was a kiss on the nose from a child who saw not a monster but a friend. And that made all the difference.